Hi guys, welcome back. It's Sunday and I'm doing my weekly gold markup on the higher time frames. This isn't hindsight trading, this is structure, execution and psychology, and this week is a really good example of why process matters more than outcome. So let's start from the beginning of the week. We had a very bullish push up during the Asian session and price kind of stopped at around the 4601 area. Again, I have got my pivot points on because these just really help me to identify the swings and where price stalled and came to. Right, we had 4601 and price retraced back to 4560 area, which became a very important low. Because once price came back down and fell to close below it, this low became protected. From that point on, I'm no longer guessing direction, I'm working with structure. So the first valid trade this week came after Monday's low was protected, as I mentioned. Once price started building above that level, my bias remained bullish. Obviously, I was bullish from last week, right? So after price made a high, as I mentioned here, the 4601 area pulled back and we were making consistent higher lows here. Sorry, me again. So waited for the pullback, scale down to the 15-minute as I do. I'll just change the time frame here. Scroll back over. So I'm going to touch on this later in this video, because on the M15 we made a low here, right? So we made a sort of an equalish high. We pulled back to 4578 area, which is higher than the previous low that I said was protected. So that's an indication to me that, we're not trying to go any lower and price is going to hopefully push up. Again, we're in all-time high territory, but my thing was, okay, we're going to, equal and potentially go for an all-time high. So that was my trade here. So scale down, as I said, on the M15, stop below that swing, and there's a reason why I'm emphasizing on this.Moving on again here, I'm on the M15 here because this is where I'm looking for my execution. I don't trade on, so I analyze on the higher time frames, but I take my trade on the M15, sometimes scale down to the M5, right? So after that happened, of course, that was like the bulk of the day, like Monday session. Going into Tuesday, going into Asian session, we had a little bit of consolidation. Again, we had price try to push up. We also have these equalish lows here. I mean, you could argue that this kind of broke, but again, the low from Monday was protected. We had a slight push up here, failed. Again, these are sometimes, for other people that like to scalp, these are valid trades here. You could have gotten a nice sell. But again, I waited. And I saw that after we made this low on the M15, we made a higher low here. So that's the reason for this entry here. Again, targeting the previous high, which is all-time high. Of course, price kind of pushed up a little bit more, but for me, all-time high, that's more than enough for a trade. So after making those new all-time highs, I became skeptical about the next move, and I'm not someone who needs to trade every single move. This is where patience comes in. No rushing, no forcing, just letting price confirm. So coming into Wednesday, price pulled back and printed a low kind of around the 4570 area. Importantly though, that was still above Monday's protected low. The pullback obviously didn't hold and price pushed higher and printed 4642. So I mean, to be fair, it is a valid trade, but I just didn't feel comfortable, and sometimes you just got to go with your gut. And shortly after that, so if I go back down to the M15, because obviously now I'm thinking, all right, price has made a new high I want to scale down to the lower time frame to look for a potential entry. So onto the 15-minute, I'll go back over here. See, so we had the push up. I mean, it pushed up twice, to be fair. We had 4639, let's call it 4640. Then we had like just under 4642. And as soon as that happened, this was like Wednesday going into the New York session, we had a pullback to the 4600 area. And then we had price push back up again. I didn't take that trade either, but I did take a sell. And I'm going to tell you why that was valid. I just want to make it clear as well. You don't get paid for being in the market. You get paid for executing when things are clear. And for me, hindsight, yeah, this looks clear. It wasn't clear to me. By my sell though, it was valid for this reason. Price obviously made another new high. This is why you scale down to the lower time frames for your entries. And it failed to close above it. I mean, slightly above, but to me, this is equal high. So yeah, the failure told me that momentum was weakening, and obviously I'm on the 15-minute looking for my entry here, and I took the trade targeting that 4600 area where it printed that low and reversed. Of course, there's more downside after that, but we don't need to catch the entire move. You don't need to be perfect. Taking a clean piece of the move based on confirmation structure is more than enough. And that's what I did. All right, so now let's move on to Friday. So I saw that, of course, as I mentioned, you know, there was more downside. We had price stall around 4581. Again, this is higher than Monday's low. It's higher than the low that was printed the previous day. But again, we had a push up and price failed to break above the previous high. And this is why I'm skeptical around all-time highs, especially like, yeah, I mean, gold is bullish overall, but you don't want to be just buying at the high. So we had this failure here, but then price came back down and it was still higher than the previous low again. So I'm thinking possibly scale down to the 15-minute, do that here, and yeah, I've got my pivots on. These help me. Yeah, it's an indicator, it helps me, right? So yeah, the furthest price could kind of go was a 4625. We had like lower highs, but these higher lows were kind of, yeah, I wouldn't say throw me off, but I just thought this is consolidation. I don't really want to be in this mix, but I saw that we were closing lower and lower, and as you can see, I took a sell here. I'm sure plenty of people took sells on Friday. And my mistake was that I didn't put my stop above. So if I go back to, so I stayed too long on the M15. If I go back to the H1 again, so the highest price that we had printed during that Thursday session was 4625, and obviously price was not closing above it. So to be safe, my stop loss should have really gone above here, but it could have gone above 4621, give or take, which means, you know, obviously you can increase your risk then. But I thought, nah, you know, I stayed on the M15. I didn't really see price breaking above, you know, 4618 and over the last, you know, couple of hours, even like during the Asian session. So of course I got stopped out here, and because it's a very busy time of day for me around this time, I wasn't looking. I just closed the phone, and then obviously when I looked, I was like, look at that drop. And as you can see, I wasn't even targeting where price went to. I was kind of targeting that 4570. Again, that was that low that I mentioned, that price kind of made over here and pulled back. So I thought that would be as far as where gold would go. And to be fair, that's still a decent trade if I didn't get stopped out. But yeah, it carried on. And then we had a pullback. That's on me. Was I annoyed? Of course, I'm human, but losses are part of trading, and even good setups lose when risk isn't placed correctly. And I'm not saying that you win every trade if you know, put your stop above the previous swing. You know, you can still get stopped out, but from my I learn from my losses way more than my wins, and looking back I can see the reason why is because, you know, that swing that I mentioned on the higher time frame was where I should have put my stop. But it is what it is. You know, got to stay patient, stay disciplined, and that's how, you know, you stay consistent. Yeah, so all 4 trades this week followed my rules. 3 worked, 1 didn't, and the losing trade wasn't invalid. Maybe, you know, people could argue and say, oh, you should have stopped there whilst, you know, you're ahead. But I am, yeah, I think it's important to show up every time you see your edge and, you know, gather the data, whether you win or lose. And for me, as I said, the losing trade wasn't invalid. It was my stop placement. And that distinction matters more than P&L for me. Now, let's talk about going into the new week. So on Friday, as I mentioned, we had price do that aggressive drop into the 4536 area. So if I go back down to the H1, yeah, so it's wicked up. And this is where, to me, discipline matters again, because despite that move, there was no firm H1 or H4 close below Monday's low at 4560. So the low to me is still holding, and a wick is information. And for me, the close, especially on the higher time frame, is confirmation. So without a close below 4560, I'm not treating that as an acceptance lower. At this stage, to me, as I said, it's still a sweep, not a break. So structurally, nothing has actually changed. So from a bullish perspective, if Monday's low continues to hold and price starts reclaiming higher levels, then I'll be looking for continuation. The process stays the same: new high first, pullback second, and execution refined on the M15 and M5. I stick to the M15, but you can, for me, I scale down sometimes if I'm not seeing, if it's not clear. On the flip side, the only thing that kind of shifts my bias is a clean H1 or H4 close below 4560, as mentioned. Not a wick, not a spike, an actual close. If that happens, I'll reassess and start looking for sell setups on pullbacks, but my bias is flexible. My rules are not. So going into next week, my job is simple. Just like last week, wait, confirm, execute, and manage the risk properly. So that's me putting stop losses above the previous swing on the higher time frame. So this video actually is slightly longer than last week, as I'm getting more comfortable talking to you through my full process. But I'll be away next weekend for a valid reason. So this makes up for my absence, and I'll be back the following Sunday. But yeah, as always, if this has helped, please like, comment and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram at Yen Trades, and on Telegram. The link is in the description. Happy trading, and I'll see you soon.